Another week, another update in Borderlands 3, and this week it brings some changes to some of the Vault Hunter skills and gear, some changes to certain legendary weapons in the game, and some general bug fixes and updates across the board. So in this video I'm going to be covering everything you need to know about this new update. As always with these type of videos, let's start with a quick message from Gearbox. It states, this week's Borderlands 3 hotfixes, which will be live on all platforms by or before 3 PM PDT today, addresses some player character passive abilities, gear balance, and some quality of life issues across the game. We're watching the character builds that players are creating and are looking through all of the different gear available to make sure that there is something for everyone. This week and in the coming weeks there will be further adjustments to gear with the hopes of creating even more build types. Our goal is to adjust some of the less used legendary gear to bring them to the same level as some of the more popular options, which I personally think is a great way to approach some of the less effective gear in the game. Anyway, from this, it then jumps straight into the Vault Hunter changes. To begin, let's talk about Amara. Reading directly from their patch notes here, it states, we addressed the concern that the skill Alacrity was only rewarding players with 1 point of bonuses, even if the player put in more than 1 point. And of course, Alacrity is a tier 2 passive skill in Amara's Mystical Assault skill tree, which gave you a bonus to reload speed for every stack of rush attained. I saw a lot of people complaining about this, so I'm glad it's now been fixed. In addition to this, they have now doubled the range of Phase Grasp, and it can now be used on targets who are even further away from you. And the cooldown is now instantly returned if a player misses. Again, this is another great adjustment to Amara overall, and they stated that they wanted Phase Grasp to be more accessible to all weapon types and playstyles, which is their reasoning behind buffing this. Anyway, now moving on to Moze, and she has had some changes to one of her class mods and some of her skills. In a statement from Gearbox, it mentions, the Bloodletter class mod was creating some overwhelming synergies for Moze, so we increased the delay and decreased the recharge rate of the shield to compensate. This should help encourage the intended use of the class mod, which is to heal shields manually, not automatically. In terms of the actual changes to the Bloodletter, they have now increased the recharge delay by 150% and reduced the recharge rate by 50%. In addition to this, the Means of Destruction skill retrigger delay was adjusted again because the change limited other builds beyond creating infinite grenades, and this retrigger delay has now been adjusted to 0.3 seconds compared to its previous 2 seconds, which is a pretty big buff to the skill overall. And then finally for Moze, they have addressed the reported bug with the Close the Distance skill augment, and it will now deal the intended shock damage. Moving on to Zane now, and we have only one change that has been made to him, and that is the Death Follows Close tier 3 passive skill in Zane's Hitman skill tree will now correctly update several kill skills after unlocking this ability. Of course, Death Follows Close is a skill that improves all of Zane's kill skills at once. And then finally, moving over to Flak, and we have some great changes here. Reading directly from their patch notes again here, it states, the Leave No Trace change last week to Flak was to forcefully inject the functionality of a cooldown into the ability. However, the value that was added was never the intended value. We dramatically lowered it to retain the promise of the ability, but with a cooldown that still allows players to gain ammo without dramatically removing a core aspect of a weapon's gameplay loop. So Leave No Trace now has a retrigger delay of 0.3 seconds instead of 2 seconds. Flak mains out there rejoice. When the original nerf to this ability hit, it pretty much made it useless and unusable, so now with this new change, it's actually a good skill to invest in again. Of course, it won't be quite as good as it originally was, but it's now definitely in a much better place and is now actually usable again. In addition to the Vault Hunter changes, they are also constantly making changes to some of the legendary weapons in the game. To begin, the damage of the legendary TDO pistol known as Gunnerang has been increased by 20% across the board. This is a great change as I do feel the weapon slightly lacked in damage when mobbing. In addition to this, TDO's Creeping Death shotgun has now had a huge damage increase of 200%, now making it a viable weapon to use. The Atlas assault rifle known as the Carrier has also had a damage increase of 60%. I've never had this weapon before, so I can't really tell how good this weapon was and how good the changes will now be. The legendary Torque shotgun known as the Lob has also went through some changes. Its projectile tick damage is now 60% of the base damage, which has been buffed up from 20%, and the projectile speed decelerates faster to increase the chances of hitting the same target multiple times. So some general good changes there overall. We also have some changes to the scopes in the game and the sniper rifles. So all sniper rifle zoom levels across the board have now been slightly reduced, and long scopes on Jacobs, Children of the Vault and Dahl assault rifles have also been slightly reduced. I don't really see this as too much of a problem, but it is a change nonetheless. And then the final changes for the weapon section is related to some of the anointed perks. Starting with one of Zane's anointed perks, it states, when Zane swaps positions with his digiclone, the damage gained is now increased to 130% instead of 75%. The anointed perk for Flak, in which when Flak hits a target with racks, the target would deal 50%, has now been increased to 100% instead. And the general anointed part, increased damage versus badasses, no longer heals the player and now correctly adds bonus damage to badass enemies. Overall, these weapon changes seem great, and I'm glad they're actively trying to adjust some of the gear in the game to make it more usable. And for the final section of the video, we have some bug fixes. To begin, Pain Terror and the Agonizer 9000 have been adjusted to have an increased chance to drop higher quality loot. This boss fight is super easy to kill and may now actually be a viable farming location. Anyway, moving back into the video, they have also addressed a reported bug with the side quest Dynasty Diner that could potentially halt the mission's progress for some players. This never happened to me, but I'm sure that would have been frustrating for those that it did affect, so that's now been fixed. They have also addressed a reported concern in which some players fouled through the floors in various boss arenas. Troy, I'm talking about you. I've had friends who have fouled through the floor there multiple times, so I'm glad this has now been fixed. And then finally, they have modified enemy spawn level discrepancies reported in later parts of the campaign. They stated that they noticed that some of the enemies were spawning at lower levels than expected in later parts of the game, so players should no longer see enemies that are dramatically lower levels than other nearby enemies in certain areas. Let me know your thoughts on all of these changes in the comment section below, and just to mention, Gearbox have stated that they will continue to address reported bugs and are hard at work continuing to address other performance concerns that will release in future updates. And that's pretty much it for the video. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like down below. It's always greatly appreciated on the channel. And if you want to check out the top 10 best weapons in Borderlands 3, click on this video on screen. Peace.